right, Bob Holt joining us, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Usually joins us on Thursdays, but was at an event yesterday. Eric Musselman was speaking. I'm not exactly sure where it was, but I'm sure it was entertaining. Bob, what was the event that Muss spoke at yesterday, and what did you get from that?
It was up at the Pinnacle Hills Church up in Rogers. I think they do a leadership series, and sometimes they have sports figures, sometimes business leaders. But yeah, it was a nice event up at the Pinnacle Hills Church. And I think it's in Rogers. I mean, sometimes you're not quite sure if you're in Rogers or Bentonville, but I think it's in Rogers technically.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get into this Razorbacks-Rebels game tomorrow at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. And fourth down, obviously, is a huge portion of any game against a Lane Kiffin coach team. And so usually we'll say you can win or lose a game on third down. It certainly does appear that this game could be won or lost on fourth down. Last year, Mississippi was 5 for 9 converting fourth down against Arkansas, but it was 2 4th-and-goal stops at the 1 that came up so big for the Razorbacks. And I would just assume that fourth down is going to have to be another huge swing play on this one tomorrow, much more so than any other game that Arkansas plays this year.
Yeah, people remember most Arkansas fans remember about last year's game is the 7 takeaways, the 6 interceptions. But, that ended up being a 12-point margin, but 2 of those touchdowns were pick sixes. And, it was considering all the turnovers, it was unbelievable Ole Miss did in that game. But that shows you, how good their offense can be. And you're right, there were 2 big fourth down stops. And I think Ole Miss has gone for it like 19 times this year. Made it a lot. Now, they were 0 for 4, I think, against Alabama. And Lane Kiffin got some criticism for going for it on fourth down a couple times. I think once, was inside the Ole Miss 25. But I think his feeling was you're going to have to gamble to have a shot to beat Alabama. He wasn't looking to play him close. He was looking to try to beat them. And obviously you expect this Arkansas-Ole Miss game to be much more competitive for both teams than they experienced last week against Alabama and Georgia. But, yeah, I think when you're preparing for Ole Miss, you can't just think about third downs. You got to think about, they may be in 4-down territory all over the field. I don't think they'd go for it deep in their territory against Arkansas like they would against Alabama, but who knows? But certainly in the red zone, it wouldn't be a surprise because, the feeling is you got to get touchdowns to win this game, not field goals. Not field goals couldn't enter into it, but Kiffin's obviously a very aggressive play caller.
I find it so interesting when we always refer to teams that are not penalized as being a well-coached team, and so you would think vice versa, right? That's not the case all the time. I mean, take case in point, LSU is the least penalized team in the SEC right now. I don't think you'd say that they're very well coached at this very moment. Arkansas and Mississippi are the 2 most heavily penalized teams in the SEC. Though I don't think you would say that they're poorly coached. But, penalties were a real issue for Arkansas in a couple of games this year. It wasn't just Georgia, and it wasn't just because they were playing in front of that crowd and everything. Maybe that was the case for the offensive line, but they've got to find a way to limit penalties in this game.
Yeah, Arkansas had 13 penalties in their opener against Rice. Obviously in front of a home crowd. Of course, that was the first game of the season. But it's interesting. Ole Miss, like you say, Arkansas and Ole Miss are the most penalized teams in the SEC. Ole Miss is last. But I was looking at the NCAA stats. Alabama's pretty bad at penalties, too. They're like 118 or something. Like Ole Miss is like Arkansas and Ole Miss are both in the 120s, I think. But I'd say Alabama's down there, too. And obviously they're a great team. They're well coached by Nick Saban and his staff. Sometimes it has something to do with the team you're playing. I was watching the Kentucky-Florida game the other night, and Florida had like 15 penalties, 8 false starts. Mm-hmm. And clearly that Kentucky crowd affected Florida down the red zone. Maybe cost them the game there late. But, Ole Miss only had 7 penalties against Alabama. So that wasn't as big an issue just as, trying to score against Alabama, because that game was 35-0 in the third quarter. The final score is a little deceptive. But, both teams need to clean it up because you figure it's going to be a close game. And if you get yourself behind the chains because of false starts or Maybe you give up some big gains because of pass interference or holding, like you make a big play and then it's called back because of an offensive hold or something like that. It's going to be tough to overcome that.
Bob, one of the big conversations this week has been the atmosphere that Ole Miss has. Obviously they like to say they never lose a party, but inside the stadium, and I'm 99.9% sure you've been to Oxford multiple times. That's correct, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. What has your experience been in Oxford throughout the Grove, and what do you personally think of their in-game atmosphere and kind of where it ranks in the SEC?
Well, yeah, the Grove is pretty wild. You'll see, there'll be a tent. They have all these tents set up, and there'll be like tents with Elvis impersonators and people who are in Halloween costumes. They just have a lot of, fans and students just partying, having a good time. I'm sure even with 11 a.m. kickoff, they'll be out there pretty early getting ready for the game. The atmosphere of Ole Miss, I can't remember exactly when they updated their stadium, but they've added a lot of things. Now, they won't, or just from a sheer volume standpoint, they can't match Georgia because I think their capacity is around 65, about 30,000 less than Georgia. But I would think they'd have a big crowd just because they're ranked. And, there'll be a lot of Arkansas fans there, I would imagine. I would imagine Arkansas takes a lot, maybe more, so I think it'll probably be a full stadium. Okay, one lasting memory I have of Ole Miss that with the touchdown club doing Matt Jones and Eli Manning, remembering the 7 overtime game. I was at that game, and we would go. You'd go down the sidelines with about 4 or 5 minutes left. I remember taking the elevator down, and you're kind of almost outside the stadium. You kind of have to go back in, for a few feet. And Ole Miss, it was at the time it was 17-10 Arkansas, but Ole Miss was driving with Eli Manning, and people were leaving the stadium. And I was just amazed. I thought, well, Ole Miss might tie this thing up or something. Didn't know it was going to go 7 overtimes, but I guess they were going to party at the Grove, or maybe they were going home. I don't know, but I just wondered how many thousands of people left that game early and then, regretted it when it became so epic. But Ole Miss has good fans, and I think it'll be a great atmosphere because I bet Arkansas is going to have 7,000 or 8,000 fans there too.
Yeah, that's one reason why, Bob. If I buy a ticket or I'm there covering a game, my butt does not leave the seat till there's all zeros on the board because you never know what's going to happen. But kind of Sam Pittman talked earlier this week and about trying to make Ole Miss one-dimensional because if they're able to get their run game going, they're going to be a tough matchup. Do you think Arkansas can win by making Matt Corral one-dimensional and having to beat them with his arm?
Well, Matt Corral's a great quarterback. I'm sure he's going to be highly motivated after what happened last year. I think in 28 games, or 27 games other than Arkansas, he's thrown 12 picks, and in that one game last year, he threw 6. And but give Lane Kiffin credit for sticking with him and, maintaining his confidence, and he came back and had a great year, and he's had a really good year to this point. But, I think anytime you make anybody one-dimensional, that helps. But Corral's obviously a really gifted passer. He's got some good receivers to work with. But if you can stuff a team's run game, it's going to be difficult for them to win, unless the team is like Mississippi State, where they basically their short passing game is their running game. But I think if you can stop the run game, no matter who you're playing, that's going to be your advantage. But Matt Corral, I expect him to have a good game.
You get past this game and kind of thought that this is the toughest stretch for Arkansas this season with A&M and then last week with Georgia and now this week on the road with Mississippi. And if you get past that stretch with 2 victories out of those 3 games, even going 1-2 in those, you still have a pretty decent look ahead. Home against Auburn, Pine Bluff, then Mississippi State and LSU before you face Alabama. Things are looking really good here for Arkansas. But really good Razorback seasons usually involve wins over Mississippi, don't they?
Yeah, but back when Arkansas first got in the league, they were playing South Carolina every year as their crossover team, and I always thought when they beat South Carolina, that meant they could have a okay or even a really good season. If they lost, it usually was a bad sign. I think it's kind of the same way with Ole Miss. They're kind of in the same realm together. I mean, they've sort of been middle of the pack to low SEC West teams, over the course of history. Of course, Arkansas has won the West 3 times. Ole Miss has never won it. They've never been to Atlanta. As Arkansas fans like to point out, the Hunter Heath cost Ole Miss the West title that year, because Ole Miss people remember beat Alabama. But now this year they've risen up together, and they have a lot of parallels. They both have second-year head coaches. Both were ranked. I think Ole Miss maybe was getting some more preseason hype than Arkansas, but they've both been ranked high, and both kind of got their head handed to them last week by the traditional powers in the league, and might be the 2 best teams in the country. Now they're trying to bounce back. So, yeah, I think whoever wins this game, that they'll have a shot to finish second in the West. I know Arkansas hasn't played Alabama yet. I'm not trying to be negative, but I think it would be tough for Arkansas to beat Alabama. But I think whoever wins this game has a shot to go on. And the loser can still have a good season, too. But I think the winner can feel really good about themselves after a tough week last week.
All right, Bob, we'll run. Thanks for making time today. Appreciate you. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
Okay, you guys take care. Bye.
Appreciate it, Bob.
Bob Holt, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette.
We're back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back for another football season. As always, BetOnline is your #1 spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With the new updated site and interface, even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline continues to be the #1 source for everything football. Head to your website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your bonus. That's BLEAV. From football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of these amazing offers for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.